It's October 18th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dan. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Israel says Yahya Sinwar, who is believed to have led the October 7 massacre in Israel, has been killed in Gaza. While Hamas is yet to confirm the death, Israel makes clear the fight will continue. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says 10,000 North Koreans could join Russian forces in Ukraine as he laid out details of his victory plan to EU leaders and NATO defense ministers. Author Kang, the first South Korean to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, says she hopes her daily life stays the same, voicing her desire to continue to write as she's done for the past 3 decades. Israel said Thursday that it killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who is believed to be the mastermind behind the October 7th attack that sparked the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
On October 7th, 2023, Palestinian militant group Hamas launched an attack against Israel, which left hundreds of Israelis dead and many more injured. The man believed to be behind the deadly attacks that sparked the current conflict in the Middle East is Yahya Sinwar. However, on Thursday, Israel confirmed that the Hamas leader had been killed in an operation in southern Gaza. According to CNN, an Israeli drone flying over Gaza spotted Sinwar's body in the rubble of a building struck by an Israeli tank. Israeli officials say they ran DNA tests and used dental records to confirm that it was Sinwar. In response to the death of Sinwar, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the moment marked the beginning of the day after Hamas, calling on those holding Israelis captive to surrender and return the hostages, promising safety for those that do so. He also vowed Israel will continue to fight, saying it will continue with all its strength to bring back the hostages taken by Hamas last year. Washington responded to the death of Sinwar, calling it a very significant day in the Middle East. According to White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Sinwar was a massive obstacle to peace. He said now that obstacle had been removed. U.S. President Joe Biden looked forward to speaking to Netanyahu about how to secure the return of the hostages and to end the war. Sullivan voiced hope that the recent events would bring about a better day for the people of Gaza and Israel, as well as the entire region, adding that the U.S. is committed to doing everything in its power to help contribute to that. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed the regime will use physical force without conditions or hesitation if South Korea violates the North's sovereignty. According to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency on Friday, the demolition of inter-Korean roads is not just a simple closure of the routes, but rather to cut off the bitter relationship with Seoul. Kim also called for the strengthening of North Korea's military to maintain peace. Now, Kim's younger sister Kim Yo-jong also slammed Seoul for accusing Pyongyang for the unauthorized use of South Korean military surveillance footage in a recent KCNA report on the demolition of the inter-Korean roads. She argued that the South Korean media has long used photos from the KCNA when reporting its news, accusing Seoul of double standards. During his visit to Europe to gather support for his victory plan, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says North Korea is getting ready to send about 10,000 troops to Russia. Our Shin Ha-young has more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that North Korea is preparing to send about 10,000 soldiers, including tactical personnel, to Russia to aid in the war against Ukraine.
We know about 10,000 soldiers of North Korea that they are preparing to send fight against us. This is really urgent thing.
His remarks were made at a press conference in Brussels following the EU summit on Thursday local time. Referring to military intelligence sources, Zelenskyy noted that although the exact number is uncertain, the North has already sent tactical personnel and officers to Russian-occupied Ukrainian territories. He pointed out that due to troop losses, Russia is trying to involve other participants in the war against Ukraine as many young Russians seek to avoid conscription. He warned that North Korea's support to Russia is the first step to a world war and added that he had discussed the issue with U.S. officials and EU leaders during the summit. Regarding the matter, South Korea's Vice Defense Minister Kim Sun-woo, who is visiting NATO headquarters, said support in the form of civilian personnel instead of troops is also possible. Kim added that it will become clearer once more information is gathered and evaluated. Russian media dismissed Zelenskyy's claim of North Korean troop deployments as lies made up to attract Western attention and support. On Thursday, Zelenskyy pitched his victory plan to the European Union and NATO, which calls for an immediate NATO membership invitation.
Either Ukraine will have nuclear weapons, and then this is defense for us, or we should have some kind of an alliance.
After facing controversy over his remarks about nuclear weapons, he clarified that Ukraine is not developing nuclear weapons and that he meant there is no stronger security guarantee than joining NATO. 신하영, Arirang News.
The NATO defense ministers' meeting is in full swing over in Brussels, and for the very first time, the so-called IP4 nations, including South Korea, are taking part in the meeting. Let's turn to Professor Andrew Millard for more. Welcome.
Good morning.
So like I said, IP4 nations taking part in the NATO defense ministers' meeting this year. Why the need for the IP4 nations to participate now?
Okay, well, firstly, thank you for having me on this morning. So I think we need to remember that for the past 3 years, these IP4 countries, so South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, they have been involved in the NATO summit with the presidents, with the prime ministers. So this is not a new move. However, this is now just a sign of the further deepening of the relationship between NATO and these IP4 countries. So this is very significant, especially at the moment as we have rising tensions in Asia, so between South Korea and North Korea, including the relationship with North Korea and Russia, the involvement of China-Taiwan relations. So all of this is very significant that now NATO is really expanding its alliance, its partnership with these countries in the Indo-Pacific. However, we do need to still be a little bit cautious. China has also recently kind of warned NATO not to drag European issues into the Asia-Pacific region. So while this is a very significant step forward for the relationship between NATO and the IP4, I do think we do need to have a little bit of caution there as well.
That's a good point. And considering the geopolitical and regional risks, their participation may be timely. Now, Professor Miller, how can South Korea then contribute and work with NATO members when it comes to defense?
Well, potentially, South Korea could have a huge role. Now, we should also remember South Korea, for the past few years, has been actively involved in other operations. So, for example, the EU Operation Atalanta, which is involving piracy of Somalia. The South Korean Navy has been very active in the Indian Ocean working together. So in terms of military support, we know it has the capabilities to do that. It's already, in terms of humanitarian aid, economic aid, and so on, been very active in Ukraine and other areas. So that's all going to continue. Where it could further increase is with the sale of weapons to the NATO members, to other members. But this would require the South Korean domestic law to be adapted so that we can start exporting, selling weapons abroad. And really right now, the domestic South Korean defense industry, no pun intended, is booming. And especially if we relate this back to the IP4, in recent years, there's been a lot of cooperation between South Korea and Australia, in particular, in the defense industry.
The Ukraine crisis will no doubt top the agenda at this year's meeting. The question is, will Ukraine be able to, garner much support from the NATO members this time as well? What do you think?
So we have to be realistic and say that it's unlikely that Ukraine is going to garner a huge amount of extra support than what they've already been getting. So we have to remember this conflict started almost 3 years ago now. we're closing in on the 3-year mark. Of course, there's going to be fatigue setting in with the European members, the European Union as well. So far, the EU has already spent 88 billion euros supporting Ukraine. It's implemented 14 separate sanctions packages against Russia. So there has been a huge amount of support in terms of economic aid, humanitarian aid, weapons. So I think that will continue. They will not stop supporting Ukraine, but I think it's unlikely that Zelenskyy is going to get that extra support that he really needs and wants.
Well, at the same time, unveiling his, so-called victory plan, Zelenskyy reiterated his desire to his country to join NATO. Now, how achievable or, realizable his desire to join NATO at this point?
Again, we have to be honest and say this is much more idealistic rather than realistic. So Zelensky's been talking about joining NATO for a while.
Right.
It's impossible that Ukraine will join while there is an ongoing conflict, because that would just mean that all of the NATO members would be automatically pulled into this conflict, and there is no will or desire amongst any of the NATO members to join this conflict and potentially escalate this into World War III.
Well, on top of the ongoing Ukraine war, now speculations are high that North Korean soldiers are being dispatched to Russia to help its fight against Ukraine. Why is it even necessary for NATO defense ministers to discuss such speculation at this year's meeting?
So this is very important. What this shows us is that the relationship between North Korea and Russia, it's getting much deeper. It's no longer just about sort of selling weapons. It's now really a much more strengthening, deepening relationship. Why is this significant? Because previously, back in July, in the Washington Summit Declaration, the NATO members already said that this sort of relationship, the trade that's happening, the cooperation is illegal. So that's very important. But it also means if North Korea is going to start deploying troops to Ukraine or to Russia, to allow Russia to then send Russian troops to Ukraine, this can only mean the conflict will be prolonged even further. And NATO, they want this war, they want this conflict to be over as soon as possible. If North Korea sends soldiers, all that's going to happen is it's going to be prolonged even further.
Alrighty, Professor Miller, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
South Korean novelist Kang, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature last week, made her first public appearance this week, where she voiced her desire to continue writing and finish 3 books within the next 6 years. Our Choi Soo-hyung tells us more.
On Thursday, South Korean author Kang, the country's first Nobel Prize in Literature, attended the 18th Pony Jong Innovation Award ceremony for her first public appearance since the Nobel Prize announcement.
The past week, so many people celebrated as if it were their own achievement. I will remember that as a deeply touching experience. Since I connect with the world through my writing, I want to keep writing and meeting readers, just as I have done so far.
After the Nobel Prize announcement, Han declined all press conferences and interviews except for a short interview with the Swedish media outlet SVT. She made her first appearance to receive the Pony Jong Innovation Award. The award was established in 2006 and is given to individuals or groups who bring positive change to Korean society through innovative thinking. The Pony Jong Foundation had already chosen Han as the winner of September 19th, and it was known that she had planned to attend even before the Nobel Prize announcement. The foundation explained that she was selected for her deep exploration of the human soul and her powerful ability to evoke emotions that captivate readers worldwide. Previous winners of the award include Hwang Dong-hyuk, director of the Netflix series Squid Game, Cho Sung-jin, the first Korean to win the Chopin competition in 2015, and former UN Secretary General Pan Ki-moon. Han Kang also mentioned that this year marks her 30th year of writing, and she's currently working hard to finish a novel she started earlier this year, aiming to complete it by the first half of next year. She added that in the next 6 years, before she turns 60, she hopes to complete 3 more books. Hyung, Arirang News.
JHope completed his mandatory military service on Thursday, becoming the second BTS member to do so. He says he'll now gear up to begin the 3rd chapter of his life. Yoon has more.
JHope is back. The main dancer of global K-pop sensation BTS has now completed his 18-month mandatory military service and was discharged on Thursday morning.
Thank you so much. I come back in good health, and I'm truly grateful. I couldn't have completed my military service well without the support of all of you, my fans.
He is now the second of the 7 members to reunite with the band's devoted fans, the so-called ARMY. Fans weren't the only ones eagerly awaiting JHope being discharged. Fellow BTS member Jin, dressed in a red suit, was also there to welcome him back. Jin was the first to complete his military service, finishing in June. All 7 are set to reunite in June 2025, after they've all completed their military service. There were no special events as the group's agency Big Hit Music had asked fans to refrain from visiting the site for safety reasons. However, in the afternoon, JHope went live on Weverse, a fan community platform, to express his excitement about starting Chapter 3 of his life, thanking fans for their support during his service. Regarding his future plans, he promised to provide further updates once the details are finalized. The superstar, who took a break as Sergeant Jong-un, is now ready to take off the beret and uniform and step back into the spotlight as BTS's JHope. Yoon, Arirang News.
Global interest and ambition to learn the Korean language are higher than ever. And here, a Korean institute that teaches Hangul is taking a leading role in meeting that demand. Our Han Daeun has this report.
유저하는 사람이 있다면 지금 시작하세요. 하늘은 스스로 돕는 자를 돕습니다.
A foreign participant speaks flawless Korean at a Korean language speaking competition in the United Arab Emirates. The contestants are people from various walks of life who learned how to speak Korean at the Kang Sejong Institute's language centers. A new center has recently opened at a university in Sharjah, a city known as the cultural capital of the Arab world.
Major is international relations. So firstly, I believe that learning Korean language will open doors and bring opportunity to work.
But it's quite challenging to learn Korean in regions that lack access to Kang Sejong Institute centers.
I studied Korean for a year and a half at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, but was unable to continue learning since there aren't many specialized Korean language academies in Macau.
Even in regions where Sejong language centers are available, thousands are on waiting lists. To address the growing global demand, the government plans to expand the number of Kang Sejong Institute centers worldwide to 300 and establish additional branches to support the expansion. It also plans to introduce AI-based Korean language instructors for those who are unable to access offline classes.
We will seek various research and development projects to utilize AI teachers in Korean education over the next 3 years. We plan to provide digital support tailored to the needs of each learner.
The government also vowed to earmark an additional budget to help the Kang Sejong Institute Foundation become a key hub for the promotion of the Korean language, culture, and more. Han Daeun, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Kim Xiang. Good morning, Xiang.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's start today with the suicide bomb attack in Somalia's capital. Now, what was the damage and do we know who was behind it?
Yes, starting off today with news from Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, where a suicide bomber detonated an unidentified device at a cafe outside a police training school. Now, according to Somalia's state media, at least 7 people were killed and 6 others were injured in Thursday's attack. Somali police said that the bomber, allegedly disguised as a soldier, entered the establishment located outside the General Kahiye Police Academy and detonated a bomb when questioned by people suspicious of his identity. The 7 killed on Thursday included police officers, soldiers and civilians. Later the same day, Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab published a statement online claiming responsibility for the attack. Al-Shabaab has previously claimed responsibility for multiple terror attacks in Somalia, including the attack on a public beach that killed 37 people in August. Now moving on to Bangladesh, where the country's International Crimes Tribunal issued an arrest warrant for former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on Thursday for alleged involvement in crimes against humanity during the violent protests that erupted earlier this year, where hundreds were killed. 77-year-old Hasina, who controlled the country for more than 20 years, was ousted by mass protests in August and fled to India. The ICT's chief prosecutor said Hasina was in control of those who committed massacres, killings and crimes against humanity in July to August and ordered the arrest of Hasina to appear in court in November. The protests began as a student-led movement against government job quotas, but a deadly escalation left over 1,000 people dead, according to Bangladesh's interim health ministry. In India now, where police reported Thursday that at least 25 people died and many others were hospitalized after consuming tainted illicit liquor in the country's eastern state of Bihar. Authorities say 22 suspects have been arrested for alleged involvement in production and sale of the tainted liquor. Now, Bihar state banned the sale and purchase of liquor in 2016. Deaths from consuming illegally produced liquor are not rare in India, with 57 people killed by toxic bootleg alcohol in the country's southern state of Tamil Nadu in June. Excitement filled Manhattan's Javits Center on Thursday as this year's New York Comic-Con opened its doors to cosplayers from around the world. With hundreds of thousands expected to attend the 4-day event, it was already filled with attendees cosplaying as their favorite characters from comic books, movies and TV shows. The event's director, Christina Rogers, called the 2024 edition the first true full event back from the pandemic, adding that this year had improved accessibility, including the free live stream of several top panel sessions.
The calendar says we are in mid-October, but it has been way warmer through this month so far. However, today's autumn rain is forecast to bring chillier air. East of Gangwon province could see up to 120 millimeters of downpours. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see snow instead, with a sharp drop in readings, and the capital area could see 20 to 60 millimeters of heavy showers. Afternoon highs in the capital will be nearly 7 degrees lower this afternoon. Then there will be a gradual drop in readings, waking up to just 9 degrees on Sunday morning here in Seoul. But taking a closer look at today's highs now, Seoul gets up to 19 degrees, Daejeon and Daegu at 22 degrees. Busan and Jeju will be warmer at 25 and 28 degrees Celsius respectively. Now, parts of Jeju are forecast to see rain into Monday, and this band of rain will bring a mid-autumn shift to the weather. So please brace for much chillier mornings from next week. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next Monday at 10 a.m. Korea time.